sort of the traditional physical structure of companies and this whole new world. Scott, it was interesting to hear you say that you thought that Marissa made the right decision because we were chatting out in front and you were talking about the fact that you thought long and hard about, you guys thought about not doing an office at all.
Yeah, well, so, I mean, we're obviously a smaller company, so, Yahoo's, like, if you came into something that was already there and already had an established culture, I think it's the wrong way to build a company, but, like, if that's what your company is, then that's, probably the right decision to make. Our company is much more like an open source project, so, maybe only 30% of our company lives in San Francisco, which is fairly rare for a startup, especially in San Francisco, I think. And we let people work from wherever they want to, so we've even seen a lot of people that are living in San Francisco move elsewhere because it's quite expensive in San Francisco, so you have to like being here because it's San Francisco, not because we're making you work here. I think it's actually, in listening to both of you guys talk, that I kind of think somewhere in between. Like I feel like having people sort of like Odesk or something, people that have no ownership in your company, right? That you can get the smartest people for very specific, discrete tasks, I think. But then you run into it's very difficult to get creative people that way. Like you can't, so sort of the difficulties with outsourcing, right? Like outsourcing to India or something like that, where a lot of people come back inside now because you want this sort of creative ability. And then on the other hand, I see very little point in having any building with employees in it that has more than 200 people in it, because even if you can have, if you can have 2,000 serendipitous interactions, then that's just noise. Like you're not doing anything with that. Like you can't implement anything in one day. So I don't see any point in doing more than maybe once a month with 100 people, or living in a place with people that aren't on your team, so you can have serendipitous interactions once a day, maybe with those people, but not with everybody who come from. Like it needs to be targeted somehow.
Right. Tell a little bit more about what your new office is like. I mean, it's big.
We only have 180 employees, only 60 of which or 50 maybe, are in the Bay Area. And we're moving into a 55,000 square foot place. A third of the building is meant for event space, stuff like this, things that we can invite the public into our building to meetups and things like that, because we find value, corporate value in that. And then the rest is for a combination of people that do work in the city. We don't make people come into the building, so we have to build a place that has a working environment that they would prefer more than their own home, or more than the coffee shop down the street. So we have to actually sort of compete to get people, even that live in San Francisco, in the building, because unless it's helpful for them to do their job, there's no point for them to come in. So it's a little bit of a different challenge. And then the rest of it is for, we do want people to have serendipitous interactions. We do want to have pool tables and DJ stations and, stuff for people to hang out and meet other people, but we only have people come, since everybody's remote, we only have people come in every once in a while, so people come in once a month or once every 2 months, and we try to optimize for that. So the whole, 3 days they're here every month, they're not doing a lot of work, they're not opening up the computer as much as they are meeting people and talking to people and brainstorming things and drinking and, playing games and stuff, because that's, we want to optimize for that in one big thing and then let them go home and concentrate.
We're on this topic, and you guys at Box are kind of the outlier in the sense that you said very clearly you want people to be in the office. You guys moved fairly recently, so how, what did you find was the right thing that was going to be able to get the talent and recruit and maintain the people?
Yeah, so on a comment on both of these, I think people are different. People have different needs and desires. For the people who want to get stuff done and be part of something bigger than themselves and can do that remotely, and that's okay, that's great. There are other people who want that sense of community and belonging, and for them, unfortunately, it doesn't exist in that many other places in life anymore, right? The workplace has kind of replaced some of the other versions of that. So coming together regularly with people that you know and the serendipity that can come from that, I think is important to people on kind of different scales. We moved from a space that was one floor near Fry's, which is the space that we were next to you guys, and then you moved into our space, so that's kind of interesting. But we moved to a 3-floor building because we got bigger. We were sitting on each other's laps before we moved to a 3-floor building, and the challenges there were really interesting. That some were anticipated and some were not. So in our sales culture, make a sale, bang a gong, everybody, it used to be everybody clapped in the whole building, engineering and marketing, every single part of HR, everybody clapped when there was a sale and celebrated together. And now we're on different floors, so we're in a 3-floor building. And we got in and we realized we were losing some of the vibrancy and the fun of that. And so there were some technological solutions on the TV monitors in each floor by the elevators. We put a big gong picture that would come up when there was a sale and made a gong sound come out of the TV so every floor could kind of clap. But it's different by definition, right? And how you think about those vertical spaces and what they contribute and what the loss is really important. And so we've tried to, in the design, break down some of those walls. We have a slide that goes 2 stories from one floor down to the lobby, and we've done some other things. We encourage people to use the stairs. They can bounce off each other there in ways that the elevator is not as conducive. So there are things that we do to try to break those barriers, but the physical barriers are real and they do affect how people relate. So we think a lot about that. And then now when we added a San Francisco office, a London office, those are different types of barriers, time zones, long distances. You have to do everything over technology. It makes for a different environment. So we try to be thoughtful in advance, and then we try to be good at adapting quickly to the changes we didn't anticipate of those new environments.
Mm-hmm. So, Evan and Scott, I talked to both of you in advance, and both of you had really compelling cases for what you're doing. And they both seemed like they were being spoken in a way that sounded like a recruiting advantage, that the ability to work from home and all that is a recruiting advantage. And yeah, I don't have to pay the high rents to be in San Francisco. Yet the culture you're creating of being there is also a recruiting advantage. And that sort of, I wonder if there is something to what that field is that you're recruiting from, and if there's a difference in the folks that you're recruiting.
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, one of our things is autonomy. So the way that we work is, autonomy is first. So you choose when and where to work, which is a really big corporate ideal for us, and so, which comes from sort of corporate backgrounds as well. So that does help us with certain types of people that have alternative lifestyles, where they have kids, or their spouse does something that requires their time, or they need to live near a hospital that is specialized or something like that, or they're remote, like they're in Europe or they're in somewhere else. So we're able to very easily get those. Like, that is a huge recruiting advantage to say work when and where you want. We don't care when you come in. If you have military service because you're living in Sweden or something, it doesn't matter. Like, whatever, just work when you're going to be productive. So that is a really big advantage for us. For people that are in San Francisco, it's interesting because very specifically we want our remote employees to not feel left out of anything. So we have to make all of our processes be as much as possible that even people working in San Francisco are basically remote employees, that you don't have work-related conversations in the office that until everybody else in your team is flown out to the office, or you do it in Mexico, or you do it in Tuscany or something like that. You choose some place, everybody goes there, and you do that then at that time. But then when you're in the office, it is an interruption-free zone. If you're working at a cafe, nobody ever interrupts you, nobody ever taps you on the shoulder. We want our office to be that if you're sitting at a computer. And then if you want a disruption, then we would prefer that your disruption is with another GitHub person, so you can have those serendipitous interactions, but to try to keep people moving through the office so it's always with different people, right?
It also, in talking to you, it sounded as though that while a recruiting feature is not having to come into the office, that you're putting a fair amount of energy into the office as a recruiting tool itself, what it's like when you're there.
Yeah, what it's like when you're there. Yeah, so the recruiting tool of the office is when you're here, on average of a couple of days a month, it's a really great place to be, and it's full of really interesting, smart people. But that your office is wherever you like. Maybe it's here, maybe it's a cafe, maybe it's your house. Maybe you want us to get a co-working space for you. It's entirely up to that person. We just care that you're productive.
So these guys are famous for having, the situation room and the jetsoning room and the bar room. Did you bring all that stuff to the new?
I did do that. Actually, I did a lot of that stuff personally because I found that the rooms were not being used. So we moved into this space. We don't have a lot of in-person meeting type things because most people sort of are more heads down about stuff, and then they go play pool or drink at the bar or something. But they don't go into a meeting room. There's less of a So I started doing that as a way to get people to go into those rooms when they did actually want to talk, when people would visit the office or when we'd have external meetings or something like that, and have it be interesting as opposed to just this really sort of sad white, So I started changing individual rooms and seeing if that made a difference in traffic patterns. Like, you make something look like a ridiculous executive lounge with this sort of faux leather furniture and like books and like, I hand painted this big thing of an OctaCAD that was totally ridiculous, but it was so ridiculous that it made people laugh and it was an interesting place to be, and so people were using it all the time for all sorts of interviews and things like that. And so we just kept going through the rooms doing that, just coming up with an idea, doing it, seeing if it worked. If it didn't work, I did one big, huge room that was all this old World War II stuff, and I went and bought antiques, and it's just totally destroyed because it wasn't useful to anybody. So everybody, it was just room of requirement. People would move everything around, and so now it's useful in its own way. It's like a recording studio now, but like you just keep messing with it until people are in there all the time, right?
Right. So, Brett, you're obviously a big data company. Clara is a very hot company. Do you use big data in developing your own workspace?
We have not. We've done it the old-fashioned way. We're not big enough yet to use big data, right? So we'd like to use our own big data, but we only do big data for enterprise-level companies. We're not quite that size yet. I think one of the things, you and I talked about this before the panel, I think one of the things that's changed over time, at least in my series of companies that I've worked for, is that I think companies are becoming more and more personal in terms of how they attract employees, right? So 20 years ago, not that I'm that old, but say it was 20 years ago, and you were designing a campus, you just designed it, right? You talked to the architects, you make it look some way, you put it together, it'd be good enough, it would fit a budget, et cetera. I think today we've moved to a much more personalized space. You talked about it, Scott, earlier, and we've certainly done that at Cloudera, where we've done a lot of user group discussions in terms of what are the colors people like to see, what are the materials they'd like to see, what's important to them. For our company, what's become really important, that is clearly important, what we got back multiple times, is functionality over everything else. They wanted to be functional, they wanted to make it as easy for them to work as possible, so spend more money on lighting, spend more money on a quiet AC system, something about that box space. There are a few things like that, right? Big monitors, more than offices, right? And we wanted to continue a very collaborative environment, so we don't have offices, we have a lot of meeting spaces where people can hang out. So it's a variety of things like that, but I think it's one of the things that's changed. And in terms of a recruiting tool, as we're talking about this, I think the first thing that brings somebody to your company is the work that you're doing, right? Are you doing something that's interesting? And what keeps them there is what your brand looks like, right? And your company and whatever facility you have is their first experience of your brand. And I think that's where it becomes really important, because those really top people, they can go anywhere, right? So they want to go someplace that has a brand that they think, yeah, I can work there. And if your space doesn't really reflect that, or the surroundings or anything else you bring to those people, if it's not consistent, you're just going to lose those people because they have multiple opportunities, at least in our area.
Scott, I was hoping when we spoke, you were giving me some information about brain science and how it impacts how people like to work. That I just found fascinating because I never thought about it. So it might be useful I remember, what was it, the optimal distance to see a tree is 50 feet or something.
That's sort of the essence of big data, how much is known, and get your hands on this stuff and apply it. When it's brain science and it actually qualifies as science, that is, it's been tested and it's been reviewed and saying, yeah, this is a fact. But if you're doing mathematical computations, a lower ceiling, you'll get a higher cognitive performance. If you're doing conceptual thinking, a higher ceiling will increase your cognitive performance. And I didn't just make that up. And so how do we apply that? And it goes on and on and on. And we're just at the beginning of being able to pull in that data and make use of it in a cause and effect way. Rather than just what we've done for certainly most of my career, which is intuitively see what seems to be working, what's not working. Not discounting the intuition at all, it's a pretty powerful tool. But these new tools are fantastic. I think we are profoundly affected by early point in my career, one of the first jobs I ever worked on was a police station. And I didn't know anything about police stations, but I got to know about them. And when the chief of police said to me, yes, this is a great place for a SAP report, this is a great place for, where you book a suspect, etc. I said, well, where are we going to put the pink room? And I had missed that one. I didn't know what a pink room was. Does anybody here know what a pink room is?